My name is Taylor Blake. And I stand in the sterile glow of Methodist San Antonio's corridor, feeling every heartbeat in my chest louder than the hospital's monitors. I haven't walked these halls since I fled them 7 years ago. And though I've built a life and a name in Chicago, the echo of that empty family dinner table still haunts me. They used to serve me ginger ale in a wine glass and watch me swallow the sting of their laughter. As if my presence were a punchline no one remembered until tonight. When I decide it's time to make them remember. Before I left, I was their dutiful daughter, the girl who wore pastel blazers at family parties. Who smiled through whispers of too ambitious. Who pretended every compliment was real. That version of me died on the night I opened 2 letters, one congratulating me on a full Hopkins scholarship. The other retracting it in my mother's precise handwriting, and realized that I'm sorry. Honey. We worry. Medical school is too stressful was her final verdict on my dreams. I learned then that love could be wielded like a scalpel, cutting away anyone who threatened the family image. And I swore I'd never let them wield that blade again. So I left San Antonio with a single suitcase and a vow to become undeniable. In Chicago, I became Dr. Taylor Blake. Papers published. Awards earned. Lives saved. I watched my name rise in neon letters on hospital marquees and conference programs, while my family's silence broadcast my non-existence back home. Every accolade felt hollow without someone to share it with, yet it was also proof that absence could forge a steel I never knew I possessed. Tonight, I return not as a supplicant but as a force. I step into Silas's ICU room under the guise of visiting consultant. My badge, proclaiming me chief pediatric cardiologist. Silas, my brother, lies unconscious under fluorescent lights, tethered to machines that keep him alive. Machines I learned to master in order to save strangers. My parents hover at his bedside, their shoulders rigid, their eyes darting the moment they realize who has arrived. They look at me as if I'm the ghost of every promise they once made and broke. I clutch the manila folder Diane handed me and the nurse's station pamphlets for medical assistant certificates. Transcripts marked incomplete. And that identical withdrawal letter, crisp with her signature. She stands just outside the door, lips barely parting when she sees me, as though she hopes I'll dissolve into the same vanishing mist she conjured years ago. But I don't shatter. I breathe in the antiseptic air and remind myself that this corridor is mine as much as theirs. Because in a few hours, I'll stand before a crowded auditorium and air their betrayals like evidence. I'll trace every stolen opportunity, every secret sabotage, and every tender dream they discarded. And when the spotlight hits me and the room goes silent, I'll watch their faces shift from smug satisfaction to shock, because the story they erased has finally found its voice. And I won't be allowed to disappear again. I grew up in a sprawling craftsman house on the outskirts of San Antonio, where pastel blazers and fruit trays were as permanent as the stained glass windows. And silence was currency more valuable than love. My mother, Diana Clark, once cut an intimidating figure in surgical scrubs, her ambitions pinned to the gleam of a scalpel, until she traded operating tables for gala banquets and reinvented herself as a socialite philanthropist. My father, Richard, came home in starched shirts and stories of valor, his FBI exploits growing grander with each retelling. Yet he never noticed when I slipped into the background. My brother Silas was the family's golden boy, bright and boyish at 35. The inevitable successor to our parents' legacy. While I was the daughter, they quietly deemed too much too loud, too eager, too dangerous to their carefully crafted image. And I learned early that ambition could make you invisible. At often, I discovered ambition's price when 2 letters arrived on the same afternoon. One, an electronic notification congratulating me on a full scholarship to Johns Hopkins. The other, a crisp, handwritten envelope from my mother, requesting my withdrawal due to stress concerns. The sun had been streaming through my bedroom window as I read the first hope igniting my chest, and by dusk, that hope lay shredded on the floor in my mother's precise cursive. I remember the way my hands shook, the paper cutting my palms, and the word withdrawal echoing in my head like an indictment. It wasn't just a lost scholarship, it was the moment I realized that my family would rather erase my future than let me outshine their narrative. So I left with a single battered suitcase and the firm belief that if they refused to claim me, I would claim myself. I arrived in Chicago with nothing but borrowed ambition. Working double shifts in emergency wards and spending weekends, writing grants that paid for my tuition. I published my first co-authored paper on pediatric heart health in underserved communities. And I still remember the moment editors clipped my byline Blake T. and sent a bouquet of glossy reprints. The hospital hallway buzzed with congratulations. A chorus that felt like music after years of muted absence. And for the first time, I tasted belonging. They didn't know who I was. But I knew I was building a life that couldn't be stolen. Meanwhile, back home, Diane and Silas orchestrated a different story. When I landed a prestigious fellowship at Stanford, I never got the congratulatory call. Instead, Silas bragged to my mother about his own promotion to CEO of a health tech startup. I'd sent her proof of the fellowship by email, copies of acceptance letters, glowing faculty endorsements, only to receive perfunctory proud of you emojis and a forwarded link to Silas's latest award. Then, 6 months ago, I stumbled upon a grant archive online and froze at a familiar proposal title: Innovative Pediatric Cardiac Outreach. I clicked through and found my entire thesis word for word submitted under Silas's name for a 6-figure foundation grant. In that moment, betrayal wasn't a whisper anymore. It was a scream. That revelation set the stage for my return. I learned that Diane had personally intervened, sending polite rejections on my behalf and quietly redirecting every program that would elevate me. In her mind, she was protecting the family's reputation. In mine, she was poisoning my chances. Silas, too. It was complicit. His signature on the grant application carried the weight of privilege and entitlement, not the labor of my sleepless nights. I spent weeks reconstructing the timeline: my original submission in April, his in June, and mine forcibly withdrawn in May. Each document I printed, each email I saved, felt like assembling pieces of a mosaic that exposed their duplicity with brutal clarity. Now, as I prepare to step into that symposium hall, I carry not only my own credentials but the evidence of their betrayals. I've rehearsed my slides in every mirror: how I'll open with clinical findings on heart failure rates, then pivot to the stolen manuscript, then watch the audience's murmurs as I reveal Diane's signature on the withdrawal letter. I've imagined Diane's smile faltering, Silas color draining, the hush that ripples through a crowd when truth collides with expectation. Tonight, my vengeance won't be violence, it will be the relentless power of facts. And when the last slide fades and the applause roars, I will reclaim not just my scholarship, my research, or my dignity, but the narrative itself, and they won't be able to look away. I arrived in San Antonio on a muggy Thursday afternoon, the air heavy with the scent of rain yet to fall, and stepped off the shuttle into the hospital's parking lot feeling like I'd come home to face a ghost. Each footfall on cracked asphalt echoed memories of being dismissed, as if the ground itself didn't want me here. I carried my credentials in a leather portfolio, visiting consultant from Chicago, alongside a bulging folder of printed emails, grand drafts, and that damning withdrawal letter signed by my mother. The lobby's fluorescent lights hummed indifferently as I signed in. And for a moment I paused, letting my reflection in the glass doors remind me who I'd become. Tonight, every paper I held would roar louder than 7 years of silence. Walking through the hallways, I passed portraits of my parents' past glories: Diane in surgical scrubs, Richard in an FBI uniform, their smiles framed like trophies above nurses' stations. I felt their eyes on me through every faded photograph, judging that child I once was. A passing nurse barely glanced at me until she saw my badge and stiffened, greeting me with cautious respect. I nodded, voice steady as I answered her question about which floor I needed. And I sensed the tension snap behind me, whispers of Chief from Chicago trailing my steps. Their whispers would carry the weight of what I was about to uncover. That evening, Diane appeared in the staff cafeteria as if summoned by gravity itself. Pastel blazer, replacing surgical coat. Her lips curved in a practiced smile that never reached her eyes. She slid into the seat opposite me, with the poise of a socialite, coffee cup cradled like a prop, and began with neutral pleasantries about the hospital's new outreach program. I let her speak, watching the way her fingers drummed the tabletop, her practiced calm fraying at the edges. When she finally asked, "How's Chicago?" I replied. Voice low. Full of people who know my name. Her smile faltered for a heartbeat before she masked it, proof that I was no longer invisible. The next morning, I shadow with Dr. Martinez in pediatrics. Playing the dutiful consultant as Diane had taught me to be invisible. Blending in until the moment was ripe. In room 12. I watched a scared 6-year-old grip a teddy bear as I explained a new treatment. And the child's gratitude filled me with a warmth that strangers' lives could still bring me solace. But as I exited, Diane intercepted me with a stack of pamphlets for a family support fund. Her voice gentle as if offering a lifeline. I handed back the pamphlets without a word. Letting the rustle of paper be my answer, I didn't need charity because I had built my own empire. Late that afternoon, I retreated to the hospital conference room and arranged my evidence across the table: the original Hopkins acceptance email, the forged withdrawal letter, the foundation's grant proposal bearing my thesis in Silas's name. Each document I placed was a nail in the coffin of their deception. And I felt an electric thrill as I traced Diane's cursive and Silas's bold signature. The room grew colder as the sun dipped beyond stained glass windows. And I whispered to myself, "This ends tonight." My pulse thundered like a war drum in my ears, heralding the confrontation to come. At 7:00 p.m., I slipped into the symposium hall where my presentation was scheduled. The audience's chatter humming like a swarm of bees. I waited in the wings, heart pounding against my ribcage as I rehearsed the pivot clinical data on pediatric heart failure, followed by the unveiling of my stolen work. A quick glance backstage confirmed Diane's silhouette among the VIP seats, her posture rigid, Silas tapping his foot in impatient arrogance. My fingers brushed the clicker in my pocket, and I realized that the moment I stepped on stage, I would no longer be their erased daughter, but the architect of their reckoning. Tonight, the silence they used to wield as a weapon would belong to me, and when it fell over that room, it would carry the weight of truth they could never mute again. I stepped onto the stage to polite applause and felt the click of the spotlight warm my skin. My name emblazoned on the screen behind me: Dr. Taylor Blake, Chief Pediatric Cardiologist, Midwest Children's Hospital. My heart thudded in my ears. But I stood tall, letting my voice carry over the hushed room as I began with the usual charts of pediatric heart failure rates, demographic breakdowns, clinical outcomes data I had poured my life into analyzing. The audience leaned forward, notebooks at the ready, until I paused on a slide titled "Innovative Outreach, a Case Study." At that moment, I cleared my throat and said, "Tonight, this case study isn't mine, at least. Not on paper." A ripple ran through the seats, Diane's expression stiffened like porcelain cracking. With a calm click, the screen shifted to a scanned copy of my original Johns Hopkins acceptance email. Then to Diane's withdrawal letter in her precise cursive. I narrated each date: my acceptance in April, my mother's retraction in May, Silas's nearly identical grant application in June submitted under his name but bearing my words. The hush grew heavy, the clinical jargon giving way to a palpable tension as I stated simply, "This is my research. This is their deception." I watched Silas's face drain of color while Diane's smile vanished entirely, her public composure shaken by the concrete proof of her betrayal. As murmurs cascaded through the audience, I clicked to the next slide: the printed grant proposal. Pages annotated in my handwriting. The title: Innovative Pediatric Cardiac Outreach, glaring back at them under Silas Clark's signature. I recounted how the foundation had offered him a 6-figure grant based on my work, of how Diane had quietly ensured I never got the same opportunity. Each accusation landed with the weight of a judge's gavel. They stole my labor, my ideas, my future. A single flashbulb popped in the back row as a journalist captured the moment, and I felt the power of truth shimmering in the air. I lowered my voice for the final pivot. Medicine thrives on integrity. When that integrity is compromised, it isn't just research that suffers. It's every patient who relies on the honesty of those who treat them. The lights dimmed behind me and a video montage played silently, children's smiling faces intercut with passages of my published papers, overlaid by the words Diane had never let me say Blake T. et al. Journal of Pediatric Cardiology. 2022. As the video ended, the auditorium remained motionless for a heartbeat longer than seemed possible before erupting into applause so thunderous it shook the walls. Backstage, I caught Diane's eye through the glass partition. She stood rigid, knuckles white on the armrests of her chair, tears glistening at her lower lashes. Sila sat beside her here. Head bowed, phone forgotten in his lap. I allowed myself a small, almost imperceptible nod, acknowledging that the damage was done and that their silence would no longer shield them. In that instant, I realized vengeance isn't a scream, it's the unwavering, undeniable proof laid bare for all to see. Later, as the hall emptied, I lingered in the darkness of the auditorium, listening to the distant echo of footsteps and camera shutters. My phone buzzed with messages, colleagues congratulating me, interns thanking me for opening the door. Even a text from Dr. Elena Martinez simply reading, "Proud" doesn't begin to cover it. I slid my phone into my pocket and exhaled a breath I hadn't known I was holding, because tonight, I'd not only reclaimed my name, I'd shattered the illusion they built around my life. Walking out into the cool night air, I felt the weight of every stolen opportunity lift from my shoulders. Above me, the hospital's neon sign flickered. Methodist San Antonio. But I no longer saw it as a reminder of past pain. Instead, it shone like a beacon of my triumph, and the next time my family tried to write the story, they'd have to include the chapter where I stood center stage and declared, "I am Taylor Blake, and I won't be erased." When the last echoes of applause faded and the auditorium emptied, I didn't linger on stage. I walked straight to the back exit, where the night air hit me like a revelation. The city's lights glittered, and the distant hum of traffic soothed the adrenaline pounding in my veins. My phone buzzed again, messages of support from colleagues in Seattle, Chicago, even strangers who had watched the live stream and sent words I could barely believe. I realized then that vengeance had done more than expose my family's betrayal, it had rallied a community around the truth. And in that moment, I felt the first stirrings of genuine release. Returning to the hospital the next morning felt different. The fluorescent corridors no longer seemed hostile but welcoming, every nurse and resident greeting me with a nod or a smile. I passed Diane's office without hesitating, though I knew she was inside, replaying the symposium footage on her computer. Instead of anger, I felt a curious calm. My proof was irrefutable, their silence now a confession. I slipped into Silas's suite and checked his charts. His vitals were stable, his prognosis improved. I placed a hand gently on his shoulder, and for a second, I imagined reconciling, not because I forgave him, but because I recognized the broken boy he once was. That afternoon, my phone buzzed with a missed call from my mother. I let it go to voicemail, curiosity tangling with old wounds. Later, I listened, her voice shaky, choking on apologetic words that felt too late. "Taylor, I was wrong." She stumbled over explanations about protecting the family name, fear of scandal, pride gone toxic. But as I pressed my thumb to silence the message, I realized I didn't need her apology to heal. The power had shifted, their regret was no longer my currency. My silence in return was the final crescendo of justice. In the days that followed, I cleared my schedule to focus on my patients, letting the aftershock of confrontation settle into routine work. Yet every time I walked past the lobby's portraits of Diane in scrubs or Richard in uniform, he no longer felt diminished. I felt layered. A composite of ambition, betrayal, resilience, and triumph. The hospital staff who once murmured about that Chicago consultant now sought my guidance. And I reveled in the irony that the world would pay attention to the woman my family tried to erase. As autumn turned the trees outside the glass walls golden, I received an invitation to speak at another conference, this time on research ethics and the importance of crediting collaborators. I accepted, but on my own terms. I would tell my story as a cautionary tale. Not for shame, but for transformation. I would remind every researcher, doctor, and student in that audience that integrity is the derivative of every good outcome, and that family loyalty should never eclipse personal truth. Late one evening, In the quiet sanctuary of my Chicago apartment, I opened the drawer where I'd kept the original scholarship offer letter, its edges frayed. Ink faded. I held it in my hand, imagining the 18-year-old me who read it with wonder. Then grief. I placed it into a glass frame on my desk. Not as a relic of pain, but as a monument to survival. Below it, I engraved a simple line: "No one can withdraw your worth without your consent." And with that, I closed the drawer, feeling complete. In the end, I learned that closure isn't a conversation with the people who hurt you. It's a conversation with yourself. It's the quiet resolve to continue, the grace to transform betrayal into purpose, and the courage to stand in the spotlight of your own life. I didn't need my family's applause to validate my worth. I needed only the heartbeat of every life I've saved, every paper I've published, every boundary I've redrawn. If you've ever felt erased by someone you love, remember this: your story is yours to tell, your voice unmuted by their silence. Share your experiences in the comments. Let's build tables of our own, places where every seat honors someone who refused to be forgotten. If this journey resonated, hit like, subscribe for more stories of triumph over betrayal, and click the bell so you won't miss the next chapter of resilience. Because sometimes, the greatest revenge is living a life they can't ignore. In the quiet aftermath of my confrontation, I found myself wrestling with an unexpected truth. Vengeance without reflection is merely spectacle. And true triumph comes when you transform betrayal into meaning. I realized that every stolen opportunity they engineered, from my withdrawn scholarship to the grant they claimed, had forged in me a relentless drive not just to excel, but to insist on integrity as the foundation of my work. When I published my next paper, I included a dedicated acknowledgement to those who amplifying voices rather than silencing them, knowing that credit and respect are twin pillars of trust in medicine and in life. It wasn't enough to expose their duplicity. I needed to rebuild a culture where honesty mattered more than pedigree. Because the patients whose lives depend on us deserve nothing less than full transparency and accountability. And so do we. Reflecting on family dynamics, I learned that love distorted by fear and pride can suffocate rather than nurture. And that silence, when wielded as a weapon, becomes a form of erasure far more painful than any insult. I discovered that the line between protection and control is defined by consent. If someone deprives you of your own choices for your own good, they are robbing you of your agency. My mother believed she was safeguarding a legacy. I now understand she was stealing my story to preserve her own. Recognizing that distinction taught me compassion for her human flaws without excusing them, and empowered me to carve a boundary where forgiveness could begin on my terms, not as an act of absolution, but as a release of the power their betrayal once held. My journey from silent daughter to vocal vindicator didn't end with a standing ovation or a family apology. It continues every time I refuse to let someone else write my story. If you've ever been told you're too much or not enough, remember that your worth isn't subject to someone else's approval, and your voice deserves to echo louder than any door slammed in your face. Share your experiences below. Have you ever reclaimed your narrative from the people who tried to erase you? Hit like if this resonated. Subscribe for more stories of resilience and justice. And ring the bell so you never miss an episode of Turning Pain into Power. Because in the end, the greatest revenge isn't revenge at all, but building a life so undeniably yours that no one can ever delete you again. Story 2. Cole is my name. As a 28-year-old, I believed I understood what family meant until approximately 6 months ago. I grew up in a white-sided suburban home with a porch swing that creaked when you rocked too hard, in a neighborhood just outside of San Diego. To the planet, we appeared to be a typical, contented family. Dusty, a golden retriever, 2 boys, and 2 parents. However, there was always something a little strange going on behind the tidy drapes and cheerful Christmas cards. When I was 2 years old, I was adopted. Dennis and Linda, my parents, had been unsuccessfully trying to conceive for years. 3 years later, they welcomed their miracle baby, my younger brother Ryan. And the atmosphere in the house changed the instant he was born. It seemed subtle at first. There are more pictures of Ryan on the fridge. There are other drawings of him on the walls. Then it became clear that, despite his age, he was given the larger room. He received the louder birthday celebrations, the nicer bike, and the new clothing. Despite their behaviors, I was constantly assured that my adoption made me unique. I make an effort to ignore it. I put a lot of effort into my studies, avoided difficulty, and received a scholarship to a reputable university. Not a single penny was contributed by my parents, even though I knew they had just paid for Ryan's private pitching coach and refurbished their kitchen. They claimed they couldn't afford it. I didn't hate them, though. Not quite. Maybe that's simply the way it happens sometimes. I thought it might not have been personal, but Ryan took it personally. At family gatherings, Dad often reminded me that I was the odd one out and the extra child. Instead of shutting it down, my parents would laugh when he made comments about it being only a trial run. "You're lucky they even kept you," he remarked, staring me in the eye when I was 16. I can still clearly recall that night. Up until dawn, I had gone upstairs and gazed at the ceiling, wondering if I was simply a visitor in my own house. 10 years later, after graduating from college, I relocated to Seattle, found employment in the IT industry, rose through the ranks, and finally, launched my own consulting business. I put all I had into it, even if it wasn't particularly showy at first. I was constructing something I never anticipated aid from my family, and they never provided it. While Ryan was flunked out of community college and posting shirtless pictures on Instagram, we communicated sometimes through messages and out-of-obligation holiday calls. But the gap between us seemed like an unwritten contract. My parents' health began to deteriorate last year. My mom was diagnosed with early-onset dementia, while my dad suffered a mild stroke. I made sure their insurance covered everything, traveled down many times, and offered assistance where I could set up appointments. Naturally, Ryan didn't do anything, but he was always present for the pictures. Images of smiling people at their bedsides with phrases like "catch every moment." I try not to be bothered by it. It wasn't about recognition, I told myself. The will then appeared. I received an email from the estate lawyer requesting me to attend the reading on a bright March day. I descended on the following flight. We met at the office of Mr. Wilcox, a weary-looking attorney with coffee stains on his collar and a receding hairline, wearing sunglasses indoors and smelling like whatever cologne influencers bathe in these days. Ryan arrived late. There were no parents present. 3 weeks had elapsed between them. My mother first, followed soon after by my father. It hadn't really hit home yet. After opening the folder and clearing his voice, Mr. Wilcox started reading to our son. "Ryan, we leave the home, the cars, and the remaining $740,000 in savings," he stated, still waiting to call. I sat. "We leave our best wishes," Mr. Wilcox added. That was it. No letter. No memento. Not even an album of pictures. Ryan smiled as though he had won the lotto. "It seems that they have finally acknowledged who the true son is. With no shame," he said. "Realize that you were never truly family." "Dude." I didn't answer. My expression remained composed, but my chest constricted. Without saying another word, I got up, thanked Mr. Wilcox for his time, and left. I sat in my rented vehicle outside and looked straight ahead. How long I stayed there is unknown to me. Something more than anger was causing my hands to shake. It felt like the last lock on a door I had spent my entire life attempting to open. I did not yell, nor did I cry. I just took a car to the airport and took a flight home. A woman named Diane called me 3 days later. She claimed to be with the Manhattan legal firm Worthington and Blaze, and to have urgent news about an estate. She asked for my whole name, including my middle name, which I thought was an error. My birth certificate is the only document mentioned. Diane told me that my biological parents, George and Ava Lennox, had died 2 weeks previously in a private jet crash while I sat on my couch, gasping for air. I never used that night. They were unknown to me. They had never met me. Yet it seems like they had been quietly monitoring me for years. They were affluent, private business people who had founded and sold many clean tech and medicinal enterprises. They had no living relatives and no other children. I was left in charge of everything. A brownstone in New York, a property in the Hamptons, and another in Napa Valley were all part of the estate. A trust fund with a combined worth of almost $42 million that includes stocks, patents, and royalties. The numbers rang in my ears as I sat there with my phone in hand, gazing at my blank television screen. Instead, I felt something heavier than the shock, amazement, or excitement I had anticipated. Sadness and vindication. I'm very sorry for the parents I've never met, for the children I believed I had, and for the little boy who once hoped they would love him as much as they loved their own son. The next week, I took a plane to New York. Everything was shown to me by the estate manager. The documents, the brownstone, and even a lockbox with handwritten notes. Every year on my birthday, they wrote to me, but they never actually mailed it. In a room full of strangers, I read them for 3 days while sobbing softly. They had desired me. From a distance. They had loved me. Violently yet silently. They had also vanished. I said nothing. I kept it from Ryan. I told no one from my previous life. I established a foundation in their honor, moved into the brownstone, and devoted my days to making plans for a future I never thought I'd have. That is, until Ryan arrived at my house in a frantic manner, saying something about poor investments and the necessity for housing. I uttered the first words I had spoken to him in more than a year after opening the gate and stepping out just far enough for him to see me. When he saw me call, he blinked, as if he was still in shock that I was genuine. They questioned. At first, I remained silent, simply glanced at him. He had shed several pounds, but not in a good way. The type of weight loss brought on by stress and an excessive number of restless nights. His fine clothing were crumpled and a bit too worn around the cuffs, and his once ideal haircut had gone scruffy. He appeared to be a guy attempting to put on the last bits of a life that no longer suited him. "Man," he remarked, feigning amusement. "I had no idea you were a resident. When I was searching for a house to rent, I came across it online and thought, no way. This is the course." He looked around at the immaculate front lawn before the gate opened and he left. The polished brass plaque with the Lennox name and the black wrought iron fence. I remained silent, allowing him to go on and on. I was not going to give him an easy time. He eventually answered, "I didn't come to fight. Simply put, recently, things haven't been going well. Some of my investments didn't work out. Burnt in a cryptocurrency transaction, as well as the home where Mom and Dad reside. I was forced to sell it. I have a lot of debt. And the market crashed. Maybe we could chat." I thought. I folded my arms. "Discuss what specifically?" He paused. "Look. I am aware that after the well, things became strange. Man. I was simply taken by surprise. I didn't mean all I said. It wasn't your intention." Without increasing my voice, I repeated, "Not even in motion. That's what you've been saying since we were little. Ryan. You're broke now. And you think I forgot. That's the only difference." His body moved uneasily. "It's unfair." "What is unfair? Are you growing up in a household where your parents made you feel superior due to your genetic makeup? Giving everything to a son who did nothing but take is unfair. Additionally, nothing was left for the person who did show up when it mattered." He cast his gaze downward. The jaw tightened. "So this is retaliation. Your sibling will be left out in the cold." When I smiled, it was without warmth. "My brother is not you. You were really clear about that." Ryan took a step forward. "All okay. All right. Look. He made that mistake. I am aware of that. However, you now have money. You can assist. I am not requesting a handout. Only a place to remain. Until I'm able to stand again." It dawned on me then. He was unaware. Not at all. He was unaware of the whole situation. He had no clue where the money came from or what it represented. So I'm not sure if he believed I had won the lottery or sold a business or whatever. "Do you know who lived here before me?" I inquired. He gave a headshake. My parents by birth. Slowly, I said. They lived here. A few weeks after Mom and Dad died. They died in a car accident. As it happens, they had been observing me from afar my whole childhood and had left everything to me. Millions. Stocks. Properties. And a foundation. What else did they leave? Letters. Dozens of them. Each year. They wrote to me. They adored me from a distance. Even if they were never able to say it face to face. Ryan looked at me as if he was attempting to figure out the equation. Attempting to take in what I had just informed him. Are you implying that they were wealthy? I'm saying that I've finally discovered what it's like to be wanted. I answered. To be selected. Not out of obligation or convenience. But out of love. He remained silent. As if someone had disconnected the batteries in the middle of his statement. He simply stood there with his mouth hanging open. Then he tried again with all the elegance of a man drowning. I apologise. Cole. Really, I was a jerk as a child. I suppose I was jealous. You appeared so put together all the time. You and I didn't need each other. I'm not sure. I suppose I reasoned that I would feel more popular if I pushed you away. I just stated you were the favorite. However, I doubt it brought you joy. Did you do it? He turned his head away. That's where I could have stopped. Closed the gate. Stepped back into the warmth of life after turning around. I was constructing for myself at last. But I stopped for a while. Not out of pity or even sympathy. Just a conclusion. Wait here. I said. I made my way back inside and along the corridor that was lined with framed drawings. My biological mother had sketched me as a child. As well as landscapes and wildflowers. She must have had a memory-based imagination. I took out a single envelope from a drawer in the study. A copy of the original Lennox will and a letter from their lawyer confirming the asset transfer were found with it. I returned it and gave it to the gatekeeper. With unsteady fingers. Ryan opened it. His face became pale as he reached the bottom of the document I was scanning. It's not real. He muttered. It's real. He gripped the paper and then turned to face me in a fierce rage. What the heck? Are you just going to watch me sink while perched on your throne? I didn't recoil. For the most of my life. I sank while you swam. I believe you will succeed. His mouth twisted. He said nothing else. Though. Simply stood there for a while before turning slowly and leaving. The papers flapping a little in the breeze. I watched till he got to the sidewalk and was engulfed by the traffic. My phone exploded as I turned to get back inside. I didn't recognize the number one. Área Code New Mexico. The other voice sounded cautious and quiet. And everything changed with what they said next. It was a female voice on the telephone. Calm but firm. Is Cole Lennox here? My throat constricted. Indeed. Who is this? A pause occurred. Elena is my name. I was Ava Lennox. The lawyer for your biological mother. Something came up. Which is why I'm phoning you. The original estate package did not include this. Slowly. I shut the door behind me. And the sound of it reverberated through the foyer like the third blow of a gavel. I believed I had it everything already. The letters. The properties. The accounts. Indeed. According to Elena. All of those belonged to the official estate. However, there were precautions. Privacy and legacy were very important to Ava and George. Their wills contained information they didn't even want revealed. However, Ava instructed me to get in touch with you only if your adoptive family contacted you following the transfer of the bequest. He blinked. Bewildered. Do you imply they were aware that this would occur? It was something they expected. But I wouldn't say they knew. Ava had a gut feeling about individuals. She reasoned that some people would come running once the dust settled and they saw you were no longer the wallet with a pulse. As she put it, I nearly burst out laughing. But my breath stuck in my chest. What specifically am I being approached about? Then she also left you something else. Elena made a private statement that the estate business shouldn't handle. She didn't want it on any paper trail or in legal hands. I keep it at my Santa Fe personal office in a lockbox. What is it? She added. I think you should come see for yourself. By tomorrow. I can have it prepared. You have to meet someone else as well. And Ava had very precise wishes about that. I took a seat on the leather couch carefully. Heart pounding in an odd cadence. Who am I going to meet? One more pause. Elena. Is this one longer? I asked. She let out a sigh. She is your sister. And her name is Maria. I went cold. The room became silent. No. I said. No. It isn't feasible. They said I was the only child they had. The wolf stated as much. She answered softly. Since you were. Legally. Maria had a tough life. Before ever meeting Jorge. Ava gave birth to her at the age of 19. The adoption process was closed. It wasn't until just before your 25th birthday that she finally found her after years of searching. Maria didn't want her life to be disturbed because she was married and had kids by that point. And now, I inquired. Hardly more than a murmur. Now. Things are different. Only a few days after Ava's death. Maria contacted her. She desired to speak. She's prepared. I got to my feet without noticing. Pacing before the enormous bay windows overlooking the courtyard of Lenox. You're telling me I have a sibling I've never met? What the heck, who? Immediately after I inherit millions. Is just now emerging from the woods. I know how that sounds. Elena remarked. Maria. However, has no decidir for money. She really stated quite clearly that she doesn't give a damn about the inheritance. All she wants to do is chat. Ava also wanted to meet you too. She stated that you should receive a letter if something were to happen to her. One that clarifies everything. After a moment of stillness, I added, text me your address. By dawn, I'll be flying. The following day seemed unreal. I didn't get much sleep. I mentally recited every phrase from that call. Another aspect of my life is a sister. Like an unread chapter. Hidden in the darkness. Prior to me, I had always believed that my biological parents were childless. That it was a one-time sadness for them to give me up. However, I now had to face an unfamiliar situation. I was not as alone as I believed myself to be. Elena was waiting for me in the front lobby of the Santa Fe law office. A sandstone structure tucked away in the hills beyond the city. She was a calm, observant woman in her late 50s with kind eyes. Small chat was a waste of her time. Elena responded. She's in the back. But Ava requested me to give you this before you visit her. She gave me a big envelope that was sealed with red wax and yellowed with age. Ava's handwriting. Meticulous. Even. And very maternal. Was my name? I cracked the seal and opened the pages. Me finger shaking. The handwritten letter was lengthy. Spanning 7 pages. Before Jorge, Ava informed me about her life. About the birth of Maria. She talked about how afraid and young she was when she decided to give her up. She talked about the years she spent looking. The anguish. And the remorse. She talked about how it had been a miracle that she had discovered me later in life. She revealed why she never sought to get in touch directly. Saying she never felt she deserved it. We saw from a distance. But I didn't want to interfere with the life you were creating. Every graduation. Every birthday. We were pleased with you. I had to pause reading twice for a little moment because my eyes were burning and my hands were shaking silently. She made one brief request at the end of the letter. Introducing your sister. You deserve to know that you were never alone. Not because I ask. Not at all. She wasn't either. I wiped my face. Gabe Elena Anoth. And gently folded the letter. I'm prepared. She showed me the way to a private meeting room down the corridor. A woman who was about 6 years older than me was standing inside when the door slowly opened. Her eyes were warm yet sleepy. And her black hair was put up. When I entered, she glanced up. And we simply gazed at one another for a while. Nobody made a move. Then she added. So you're Cole, with a sad grin. I gave a nod. You're Maria. Too. She appeared to be about to say anything further when her phone suddenly died. Without responding, she looked down, scowled, and flipped it face down. The apologise, she said. This week has been strange. I wanted to meet you, but I nearly didn't make it. I had to meet you. Opposite her. I took a seat. Were you aware of me? According to her, not until almost a year ago. In her letter, Ava stated that she had no expectations. She only wanted me to be aware that she had a new kid. I took a while to reply. I wasn't prepared. Then after the plane crash, I guess I realized. Time's not something you can buy more of. Slowly, I nodded, the weight of it all still sinking in. So where does that leave us? Maria looked me dead in the eye. That's what I want to figure out. But there's something else. Something you should probably know before we go any further. I leaned in hard, starting to pick up. She reached into her purse and pulled out a photograph. Faded old with worn corners. She slid it across the table. And when I saw who was standing in the background of that photo behind Ava, behind Maria, I felt the bottom drop out of my stomach because I recognized him. I stared at the photograph, heart pounding in my chest like a war drama. It was grainy, clearly taken decades ago. But the face in the background was unmistakable. Cropped near the edge, arms crossed and partially turned away. Was Dennis the man I called Dad my entire life? The same Dennis who used to tuck me in when I was little. The same man who once taught me to tie my shoelaces. Who took me on bike rides. Who later signed a will, leaving me nothing. Maria saw the recognition in my face before I said a word. So, she said, her voice low. You see it too. I looked up slowly. Why was he there? Maria sighed, folded her hands and leaned forward. That photo was taken in Albuquerque. 1994. About a year before you were adopted. Ava didn't know it was taken. Someone else in her circle snapped it at a dinner party when she found it years later. She almost threw it away. She thought she was seeing things. But it was him. Dennis. She never figured out why he was there or how he was connected to anyone in that room. I ran my hand through my hair trying to process what that meant. Are you saying my adoptive father knew Ava? We don't know how well, Maria said. But yeah. That's what Ava suspected after she found the photo. She went digging. She found out Dennis used to work for a pharmaceutical company in New Mexico in the early 90s. The same company Ava consulted for before she built her own firm. Their paths crossed more than once. Wait, I said, sitting up straighter. Are you saying the adoption wasn't random? That he knew who I was? Maria hesitated. That's exactly what I'm saying. Ava was convinced it wasn't a coincidence. But by the time she realized it, it was too late. You were already with Dennis and Linda. She tried to reach out, but they cut off all communication. It's why she and George moved their operations east and disappeared from public view. She didn't want to risk your life being upended. My pulse thudded in my ears all my life. I thought Dennis and Linda had just happened upon me. That I'd been placed into their arms by chance or providence. But now this changed everything. It meant Dennis had chosen me. But not out of kindness. Out of control. Why wouldn't they just tell me? I asked. Voice cracking a little. Why would they go through all that? And then treat me like an outsider? Maria's face softened. Ever wondered the same thing? But you said they never treated you like you were really theirs. Right? Yeah. I said bitterly. They reminded me of that every day. Maybe that's the thing. She said. Maybe Dennis wanted to keep you not because he loved you, but because he wanted to hurt Ava. I stared at her. You're saying I was a pawn? She nodded slowly. For leverage or revenge, Ava never figured it out completely. But she carried the guilt for years that she lost you to them. I didn't know what to say. I felt like my brain was trying to rewrite my whole life. Page by page. As I sat there, Maria reached over, placed a hand on mine. I'm not saying this to hurt you. I just think you deserve the truth. Ava didn't want to leave this world with secrets. And I think she hoped we'd find each other. Even if it was late. I squeezed her hand gently. And for the first time in a long time, I felt something settle inside me. A piece clicking into place. Thank you for telling me. I said quietly. I needed to hear it. Even if it hurts. We talked for hours after that. She showed me more letters Ava had sent her. Shared photos. Told me about her kids. Hair life. Her regrets. And I told her mine. The broken holidays. The fake smiles. The loneliness for the first time. I didn't feel like I had to explain myself to someone. She just got it. Eventually, she asked the question I didn't expect. "So what are you going to do about Ryan?" I exhaled slowly. "Honestly, I don't know. He came crawling the second he lost everything. And the way he looked at me like I was just a safety net. Like I owed him." "You don't," she said. "You owe you whatever gives you peace. That's the only thing that matters." A week later, I flew back to New York. I'd left Ryan's call unanswered while I was gone. And I came back to 5 more voicemails and a text that simply said, "Please call. I'm losing everything." When I pulled into the driveway of the brownstone, I saw him waiting on the front steps. Doffel bij beside him. Hoodie pulled up looking like a kick. "Doc." He stood when he saw me call. "Thank God, man. I didn't know if you were even coming back." I parked, got out and stood in front of him. "This isn't your home." "Ryan. I know. I know," he said quickly, hands raised. "I'm not here to stay. I just... Look. I'm sorry. Okay. For everything. For the things I said at the will. For the stuff I did growing up. I was a kid. Man. I didn't know what I was doing. You were still saying that stuff 2 years ago." "I know." He looked down. "I was jealous. You had your life together. You didn't need them the way I did." I raised an eyebrow. "You mean you needed their money?" He didn't respond. Just stared at the ground. "I know about Dennis," I said. He looked up sharply. "I know he knew Ava. I know I wasn't adopted by accident. He took me to get back at her. And he never loved me. Not really. And Linda just followed his lead. But you made a choice every single day to make sure I knew I didn't belong." His jaw clenched. "I didn't know about any of that." "That's the point," I said. "You didn't want to know. You just wanted to win." Silence stretched between us. Then he said, "So what? Now, you slam the door in my face. Let me fall." I looked at him, at the man who had once been my brother in name, if not in spirit. And I made my decision. "No," I said. "I'm going to give you one chance." His eyes lit up. "I'm setting up a charitable foundation under Ava and George's name. It's going to support underprivileged kids and young adults who were displaced like I was. I'm hiring people who understand hardship, who know how to build something from nothing. And I'm willing to give you a job entry level. Starting from scratch. You'll get a salary. But nothing fancy. You'll report to someone else. And if you mess up, you're out. No safety net. No more bailouts. You take this seriously where you walk." He blinked at me. "You're serious, dead serious." He looked away. Shoulders slumped. "What if I'm not cut out for it?" "Then you figure it out," I said. "Like I did. Like everyone has to. Or you walk away and I don't hear from you again." He was quiet for a long time. Then he nodded slowly. "Okay. I'll do it." It's been 8 months since then. Ryan took the job. He's been quiet. Reserved. But he shows up. He's learning slowly. And I'm watching. Not as his savior. Not as his brother. But as someone who knows what it's like to rise from nothing. Maria and I talk every week. I visited her family twice. Her kids call me Uncle Cole. And for the first time in my life, that title feels like it means something. The brownstone is still home. But it's not a castle built from revenge anymore. It's a place of memory. Of healing. Of legacy. Sometimes late at night, I read Ava's letters again. There's one line I always come back to. "You were never a mistake. You were a second chance. And maybe now, finally, I get to be someone else's." Maybe that's what family is supposed to be. Not blood. Not paper. But choice. And this time, I'm choosing peace. Story 3. I had no intention of purchasing my brother's business. But Michael also had no intention of ceasing to make fun of my small store. Evenings in life may be amusing. The score. Crystal glasses were clinking as family members shared their most recent accomplishments at the annual Morrison family Christmas gathering. I saw my brother conduct court by the fireplace while drinking water from a champagne flute in a corner. The merger is nearly finished. Michael made the announcement to our appreciative family members while casually adjusting his Rolex. I'll be in charge of the whole West Coast business when Global Tech takes over our section. Like when Michael made varsity football, got accepted to an Ivy League school, or earned his first executive job. Our mother smiled proudly. My brother's touch converted everything to gold. That's what our family thought. Anyhow, Olivia. How about you? Margaret then turned to face me, her voice brimming with phony worry. Are you still operating your little business? As I considered the meeting I had planned for tomorrow morning, I nodded. Indeed. Still operating that little shop. You mean? Michael's chuckle pierced the room as he continued to counsel. Now what? 5 workers. Lou. It was pointless for me to correct him. Give him time to reflect. Summit Consulting was only a little business. Give him faith. I devoted my days to assisting nearby companies with payroll and tax preparation. There was far greater curiosity in the truth. However, I had long since discovered that my family didn't care about the truth. You know, I could put in a word for you at Global Tech since Michael swirled his pricey scotch. Obtain a legitimate job. Something steady. Our dad gave us a nod of approval. Son, that's really kind of you. Olivia, you ought to think about it. Your age isn't decreasing. Additionally, you have that tiny consultancy thing. But isn't it more of a pastime than a job? Recalling the pile of acquisition documents on my desk at home, I tightened my hold on my glass. About 5 years ago, Summit Consulting ceased to exist. But my family still viewed me as the same struggling sister who had left her secure corporate position to pursue her own interests. Thank you, I'm good where I am. Silently, I said. Michael grinned. Yes. You are. Hi there, everyone. As usual, he commanded the attention of the room by raising his voice. Did I mention that tonight's party will be attended by the CEO of Global Tech, George Harrison? He is now almost like family. Our mother was so excited that she almost dropped her glass. This is George Harrison. Michael. Oh. That's fantastic. Knowing exactly why George Harrison was at our family's Christmas gathering, I looked at my watch. It had nothing to do with Michael's perceived value to the business. With every drink, Michael became louder and more cocky as the celebration went on. He went into depth about his post-merger plans, including how he would reorganize his division and make the necessary adjustments. He said that Global Tech needed new blood. Someone who is aware of contemporary business. Harrison is nice, but he's overly cautious and old school. I'll show them how to do it when this merger is finalized. It nearly made me feel terrible for him. Nearly. It was precisely 8:30 p.m. when the doorbell rang. Michael prepared to see his CEO by adjusting his tie. Now, everybody, he declared, be natural. Harrison is more than simply my employer. After the union, he will be a family member. George Harrison entered through the open door, his silver hair shining brightly. His presence immediately commanded respect. But instead of saying hello to Michael, he looked around the room before he came across me. He murmured, Miss Morrison, as he passed my brother, who was in shock. I appreciate you coming. I wanted to express my gratitude to you directly for making this change so easy. Michael's expression twisted in bewilderment. I don't understand. Sia. My sister is someone you know. Harrison had a startled expression. Do you know her? He looked from one of us to the other. I'm here tonight because of Olivia. Miss Morrison. Global Tech was bought by her. There was utter silence in the room. Michael spilled his drinks on the pricey carpet as they fell out of his fingers. For support, our mother seized the closest chair. Dad's face had turned completely pale. That is not feasible. Michael stumbled. Olivia is the owner of a small consulting business. She handles bookkeeping for nearby businesses. I cautiously put down my glass. Actually, Summit Consulting Group is a little bit more than that. My dear brother, As of yesterday, we, a worldwide corporate acquisition business. They held a majority stake in international technology. I was finally revealing the truth that I had been keeping concealed for years. The Summit Consulting Group was more than simply my small business. It was among the nation's biggest private equity companies. I had quietly developed an empire while my family disapproved of my professional decisions. And now my brother's business was part of that empire. The color had gone out of Michael's face. However, the merger. I got promoted. Regarding that, I said quietly, it is probably time for us to discuss some organizational adjustments. There was an overwhelming quiet in the room, as my family attempted to comprehend what they had just learned. I could almost hear their thoughts racing. As George Harrison went on, Michael stayed still, his empty glass still hanging from his fingers. Harrison claimed, apparently unaware of the tension, that Miss Morrison's acquisition team had been incredibly effective. The manner in which Summit Consulting arranged the transaction. Incredibly clever. Mikhail, your sister is a true business whiz. Michael's face turned crimson instead of white. He muttered, this is a joke. It must be. Olivia doesn't. She is unable to. Can't what, Michael, I said softly. Incapable of managing a profitable business. Cannot outsmart global technology. Is bored. You can't be more than your little sister who is battling. At last, our mother was able to express herself. Why haven't you told us all these years? Olivia. My love, we considered. You had the precise thinking you wanted to have. I interrupted her. You all chuckled when Michael made fun of my small store at Thanksgiving last year. Don't you, or last Christmas? When my father recommended that I enroll in some evening programs to enhance my chances. Dad moved apprehensively. All we were worried about was your future. The future. I couldn't contain my laughter. Dad. The assets managed by Summit Consulting Group are more than $12 billion. In the past 3 years, we have purchased 17 significant companies. That little store you were worried about so much. It just paid $2 billion to acquire global tech. Margaret also suffocated on her wine. Uncle David's tray of Christmas cookies fell on the ground. Michael. However, Michael appeared on the verge of blowing up. This is not possible. He stepped closer to me and snarled. You cannot simply enter my business and take control. For 8 years, I have been employed there. I will soon be the director of the West Coast. Harrison cleared his throat. Well, about that job, no. I paused quietly. George. Let me take care of things. I looked at my brother. We must talk about your position at Global Tech. Michael. Roll. Maybe someplace more private. An octave was added to his voice. That advancement was mine. Your workplace isn't enough. I spoke aggressively. It was now an anxious stroll to his home office. As we exited the celebration, I could hear the rumors bursting out behind us. After us. Michael slammed the door. His executive poise, which he had worked so hard to preserve, broke. For what length of time, he made a demand. How much time have you spent organizing this? Was all of this a plan for retaliation? I took a seat in his priceless status symbol, a leather chair, and saw him pacing. It may surprise you to learn that it's not all about you, Mikhail. For years, Summit has been interested in global technology. It was an odd coincidence that you worked there. Is it a coincidence? He gave a sour laugh. Do you think you've always been envious of my accomplishments? I took out my phone and launched the app for my bank. Brother, let me show you something. I swiveled the screen in his direction. The number caused his eyes to widen. That isn't feasible. My own wealth. Calmly, I said. And I just keep fluids for that. The value of Summit Consulting Group is significantly higher. Michael, tell me about success once more. You all were worried about my future. Tell me. His rage subsided a little when he dropped into a chair. Why did you never speak up? Did you think I was real? One of you, I reclined. You believed I was a failure. 2. Do you recall how work prevented me from attending my father's birthday celebration? You also implied to everyone that I was probably too ashamed to confess that I couldn't afford a present. That evening, I attended a board meeting to finalize the $2.8 billion acquisition of Turner Industries. Everyone assumed I was making excuses. Though, there was a greenish tint to Michael's face. The Turner agreement. You were that person. However, that implies. When he realized about the Madison merger last year, his eyes expanded. The purchase of Carson Summit Consulting in its entirety. He attested. For years, we have been secretly purchasing businesses, establishing an empire, while you were all occupied with feeling sorry for me. He said. And now you own Global Tech. Do you own my business? Indeed. I straightened my clothing and got to my feet. In addition, I have certain reservations regarding the leadership of the West Coast division as the new owner. Michael jerked his head up. You wouldn't risk it. Would I not? I took a folder out of my luggage. I had packed it specifically for this occasion. Michael, let's discuss your performance reviews, your risk assessments, the shortcuts you've taken, and the rules you've broken. That is commonplace in the corporate world. He objected. No. I snapped. It's careless. It's haughty. And it ends today under the leadership of the summit. He sagged down in his seat. That's all. Then. Are you letting me go? Your own brother. I slipped a paper over the desk. Actually, I'm giving you an option. You have the option of accepting a lateral move or a transfer to our Minneapolis office. No promotion, but the same pay. Another option is to leave with 3 months severance. Minneapolis. His voice broke. However, my life is here. My connections and pals. Your exaggerated feeling of significance. I added your executive parking space and your country club membership. Yes. You would lose everything. But you would still be employed. You have an option. Michael's hands trembled a little as he gazed at the page. Olivia. This is awesome. This is how you use your power. It is inhumane. Cruel. I got up slowly. As if it were terrible to make fun of my business at every family get-together. As if it were horrible to inform our parents that I was a letdown. It was harsh to offer that I accept a position as your assistant. From outside came the sound of the celebration. As if they had always believed in me. I could hear our ancestors still talking about the revelation and rewriting history in their brains. You can't make up your mind till New Year's. I remarked as I made my way to the door. And Michael. Too. The corner office about which you have been boasting. It's going to be a break room. When I got back to the party, my parents were gathered with Uncle David and Aunt Margaret. As I got closer, they stopped talking. With her arms out, my mother took a step forward. We had no idea. Darling, why didn't you tell us that you've been so successful all this time? I moved away from her as she tried to embrace me. Mom. Would it have made a difference? Would your treatment of me have been different if Michael's achievement hadn't been as obvious? It would have. Of course. She was adamant. Were you with your family? No. Silently. I said. My DNA is shared with your people. Family members help one another. Family members have faith in one another. Respect from family doesn't need achievement. My dad cleared his throat. We may have made mistakes. But we always had your best interests in mind. Princess. Did you? I arched an eyebrow. Or did you desire what your country club mates thought looked the best? At that moment, George Harrison came up, sparing them from having to respond. Miss Morrison. I'd better leave early. We will meet tomorrow to talk about the changeover. Naturally. I grinned. The final paperwork will be sent over by my team in the morning. I heard my mother whispering to Aunt Margaret as Harrison walked away. Have you heard that? She has a group of people. I nearly chuckled at the ridiculousness. They felt proud now. They were intrigued now. My accomplishment was now apparent. Measurable. And remarkable to their social circle. Looking shell-shocked, Michael came out of his office. He went directly to the bar and poured a huge drink for himself. Our family members rushed to him right away. But he was silent for once. I packed all my belongings and prepared to go. I hadn't intended to tell the truth in this manner. But maybe it was better this way. Unquestionable. Public. And clean. So soon to leave? My dad inquired. However, we have a lot to discuss. You have to tell us everything about your business. In fact, I looked at my watch. Tomorrow, I have an early trip to London. Meeting of the board with an additional acquisition target. But my mother objected. It's Christmas. Indeed. I grinned. You all understand why I can't remain for the first time. No more feigning embarrassment or difficulties to avoid family get-togethers. I'm successful. Therefore I'm leaving. Because while you were all too busy questioning me to notice, I created something remarkable. I made my way to the door and then made one final loop around. Oh. And Michael, do you recall your earlier statement that you would put in a good word for me at Global Tech? Don't stress over it. I believe I can get by on my own. As I drove away from my parents' house, the expression on his face nearly made up for years of disdain. My phone was buzzing with messages from family members who were anxious to get back in touch and learn about my business. To assert that they had always recognized my ability, I removed them all. They say that the finest form of retaliation is success. However, purchasing worldwide technology, exposing my brother's mediocrity, or even disproving my family's beliefs were not the true victories. The true triumph was never having to ask for their permission in the first place. Michael accepted the Minneapolis job 3 months later. He's doing well in middle management. As far as I know, having conveniently forgotten the years they spent discounting my accomplishments. My parents now proudly tell their acquaintances about their talented daughter who is an entrepreneur. Me, I just completed the acquisition of Mawson Technologies. A small business. The pride and delight of my father. He had always anticipated Michael would eventually take over the company. I had my assistant notify them of the ownership transfer. Some things are, after all, best conveyed in person. And a few more things. A message that reads from your small shop owner's desk is a superior way to convey certain information.